Amud Yomi Chodesh Cheshvan, sponsored by Shahab and Shana Rabbi, the health and prosperity of their family and the health and their hatzlacha and the growth of Torah, sponsored by the Ami family, the Lu Nishma Yosef ben Algar Simcha, Algar Basimcha Badvacha, Eliza Talia Sarah Bat Hanoch Faivel. Okay, so we were talking about if somebody eats without saying a blessing beforehand, without making a bracha beforehand, so all the terrible stuff that it's compared to, right? It's as if you stole from the sacrifices of Hashem, or it's as if you use something of the Bet HaMikdash, which is a sur. And the Gemara brought a stira that one pasuk seems to indicate that the food this world belongs to man, and one pasuk says that everything belongs to God. So how do you rectify the two pesukim? So the Gemara said it depends. If before you make a bracha, before you make a blessing on something, it belongs to Hashem. After you make a bracha, that's the way you acquire it. That's the way mankind is. It takes that item and then you can enjoy it. So Gemara on the top of the Amud, Lamed He Amud Bet says, Amar Reb Chanina bar Papa, Kol hanene min haolam hazeh belo beracha, gilu godel HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'knesset Yisrael. Anybody who enjoys from this world without a bracha, it's as if he stole from Hashem. It's as if he stole from God and the Bnei Yisrael. Shenema, the pasuk says, it's the pasuk that says, "Gozel avivimo," somebody who steals from his father and his mother. Va'omer ein pesha. I didn't do anything wrong. There's no sin over here. Chaverhu leish mashchit. He's a friend of the man who is the destroyer, the destroying man. So who is this in reference to in the pasuk? So ve'en aviv ela hakadosh baruch hu. A father in the pasuk is reference to Hashem. Shenama, the pasuk says, Allahu avicha kanecha. He is your father, the one who created you, right? So therefore, that is in reference to a father. Ve'enimo, when the pasuk says, Gazal aviv ve'imo, who's the imo? Enimo ela knesset Yisrael. That's in reference to Klal Yisrael, to the Bnei Yisrael. Shenema, the pasuk says, Shema b'ni musa avicha v'al tetesh Torah timecha. Right? Listen, my son, the rebuke of your father, and don't leave the Torah of your mother. So that's the Klal Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael is in reference to your mother, is in reference to. So you're stealing from both of them. Now, the end of the pasuk says, Chaverhu leish mashchit. Right? He's a friend of the man who is a destroyer. So the Gemara says, who is that? My Chaverhu leish mashchit. So I think the Ra'ah over here explains that over here, of course, if a person does an Avera, because this is talking about a person that sinned. So we're saying this person that sinned is like a person that is a destroyer. I mean, it sounds like a person that sins also. So of course, a person that sins, that does something wrong, is like somebody that does something wrong. What's the Gemara asking over here? So he explains the Gemara over here to mean that's why the pasuk over here, the Gemara understands that leish mashchit is a specific person that did something specific, and therefore that's what we're comparing to. Not in general. Obviously, people who do things that are wrong are all compared to each other, more or less, because they did something wrong. But here it's something special. Who is that? Who is the destroyer? The man who's a destroyer? So Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Papa Chaverhu leYeravam ben Nevat shehishchit et Yisrael avim shebashamayim. He is a friend of Yeravam ben Nevat, who destroyed Klal Yisrael, who destroyed the Bnei Yisrael to their father because he was a terrible person. He did a lot of averot. He was one of the people who brought in he brought in avodah zarah, he brought in idol worship, he brought in two golden calves, right, into the area of the Bet HaMikdash, and he caused the Bnei Yisrael, whatever the whole story is, it's a long story, but he caused the Jews at that time to worship avodah zarah. So not only did he sin, but he caused other people to sin. That's a real person who destroys the Bnei Yisrael, and therefore a person who this is a powerful thing. A person who eats without a bracha, it's similar to Yeravam ben Nevat, who sinned terribly and caused other people to sin terribly. So it's something to be mindful of when you're about to eat or drink, to remember that there is such a thing as a bracha, to thank Hashem. When we say a bracha, this is the point of a bracha. Just since this is the sugya. Right, when there was a plague in the time of David HaMelech, so he was mitaken. He established that every day a person should say 100 berachot, right? At least 100 berachot. It doesn't mean once you hit 100, don't say any more berachot. It's at least 100 berachot. Victor Miller explained amongst other, but he was known for this, that he used to explain that when you make a bracha doesn't mean, bracha, yeah, and then you drink and you're like, wait a second, did I make a bracha? Did I not make a bracha? Where am I holding in the bracha? Did I say the right bracha? It means a person has to say a bracha to understand that everything that a person has comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, comes from God. And if a person keeps thinking of that, this comes from Hashem, this comes from Hashem, thank you Hashem, thank you Hashem, thank you Hashem, a person will live a much more meaningful life, because first of all, he doesn't attribute anything to himself. He doesn't say this is because of me. And second of all, he learns to say thank you. It's something that's so important in our lives, not to take credit for things that we didn't do. And a person will become haughty. Like this, if a person always remembers this is from God, this is from God, this is from God, this is from God, he's going to remember, okay, there's a God in the world and not everything comes to me. So, I mean, this is not a muster shmooze, but it's like an important concept when it comes to, especially the sixth parak, where you understand that we're not just throwing out brachot because we're trying to get to that number 100. It's to remember constantly, this is Hashem, Hashem gave me this, Hashem gave me this, and it's an important concept. But anyway, the Gemara says further. So now we were going to bring a different Gemara that has to do with Reb Chanina Bar Papa, right? He asked the question before, so there's a lot of times the trend of the Gemara once it brings from one person something, so we'll continue bringing a lot of other things that he said. This is all fun and games in comparison to yesterday, so enjoy. So the Gemara says like this: Reb Chanina Bar Papa Rami, he asked the question, he asked the contradiction. Kativ, it says in one pasuk, "V'lekachti tegani be'ito." I'm going to take my grain, God is saying, in its proper time. So whose grain is it? God's grain. The Gediv, there's another pasuk that says, "V'asafta deganecha." We say it every day, right? You're going to gather in your grain. So 1 second, whose grain is it? Is it God's grain or is it our grain? So Gemara says, "Lo kasha kan bisman she'yisrael osem mitzvah shamakam." If the Jews are doing, if the Yidden are doing what they're supposed to be doing, so then, meaning we're keeping the Torah and the mitzvot, and we're listening to what Hashem says, so then it's our grain. But kan bisman she'en yisrael osem mitzvah shamakam. This, where it's Hashem's grain, is when we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. So therefore, it's not ours, it's still considered God's. So this is the next Gemara, is one of the more famous Gemaras in probably Shas, and is spoken about quite often, at least in the yeshiva worlds. So the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, Ve'asafta deganecha, right? We just brought the pasuk of Ve'asafta deganecha, so we're gonna dorish it, we're gonna expand on it further. So Ve'asafta deganecha means one of the blessings that Hashem tells us in Shema is that if you do what you're supposed to do, then you're going to gather in your grain. Ve'asafta deganecha v'tiroshcha v'yitzarecha, right? So Ve'asafta deganecha, you're going to gather in your grain. Ma Talmud Omer. So the Gemara says, what is the pasuk coming to teach you? What's the chidush of the pasuk? The pasuk is telling you that you're going to go out to work and you're going to gather in grain. The Torah doesn't use extra words. The Torah doesn't just say things for the fun of saying it. Obviously, every word of the Torah is so precise that there has to be something learned from it. So when it says that you're going to gather in your grain, what is it telling you? That you gather in grain at the time of the crop? So no, since the pasuk says lo yamush sefer Torah zemipicha, Torah learning, it cannot be removed from your mouth. Meaning you constantly have to be learning. Every second of the day that a person has, he has to be learning. So if that's what you're supposed to be doing, I might think that this pasuk says that the Torah learning cannot be removed from your mouth, meaning you're never allowed to stop learning. So if that's true, then how would you ever be able to go to work? How does a person? What's the heter? What's the leniency to be able to go to work every day? You're supposed to be learning all day. How do you go to work? You're bittul Torah. How could that be? So therefore, the pasuk comes to tell you, Talmud Lomer, that's the chidush, that's what this pasuk wants to let you know. Ve'asafta deganecha hinig behem minig derech eretz. Do it the normal way that people in this world do it, which is what? At the time that you have to plow, you plow. At the time that you have to go to work, you have to go to work. Right? According to Shulchan Aruch, I think it's only you have to go to work 3 hours a day, and you learn 9 hours a day. That's further than we have a clear cut how much we're supposed to be working. And how much you're supposed to be working. Okay. Even according, I think the Shach or the Taz over there, the Shach over there says, nowadays things have changed. So a balabad, you should only learn 3-4 hours a day. Okay, we can't learn 8 hours every day, but 3-4 hours, a regular balabad person who goes to work, 3-4 hours a day, they should at least learn. That's why this Gemara is a lot of fun in yeshiva. So the question is how much a person should work, how much a person should learn. So of course, a person should always have a Rav and always discuss these things with a Rav. A Rav has to know where they're holding, how much they're able to handle. But the idea, the concept is there that a person, whenever he has a chance to learn, a person should be learning. That's what they should be doing. They say over a story, I think, with Aaron Cutler. I think it was with Aaron Cutler. So he used to go from BMG when he went collecting. He used to go collecting a lot. Like every Torah Institute, they're always going collecting. And Baruch Hashem, it's a thing that Hashem made so that people are more involved. So he went collecting one time, and at the end of the day, a long day of going around, asking people, he came to sit down to learn. And his driver, the person, his gabbai, one of the yeshiva bachrim, he was with him. And he sits down on the couch and he opens up a newspaper. He's like, what are you doing? Like, why don't you open up a Gemara? He's like, Rabbi, I have my Olam Haba. I'm not worried. He says, Olam Haba, I'm not talking about the next world. I'm talking about this world. The enjoyment in this world is learning, not the next world. So it is. It's enjoyable. It's enjoyable to learn. If a person learns correctly, and it's really, really enjoyable. But anyway, Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Right, a person has to go to work. A person has to live a normal, healthy life. Rabbi Victor Miller says that a person, in order to have a decent ruchniut, a decent spiritual life, he has to have a decent physical life. He has to have a decent job. He has to have a decent house. He has to. Decency is not something that the Torah forbids. It's something that a person has to be normal. A person, obviously, again, don't go to extremes. But a person has to have a decent gashmiut. Right, a physical living in order to have a proper ruchniut, something to keep in mind. But again, don't overindulge in work. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, what do you mean? After Adam Chored B'Shat Charisha, is it possible during the plowing season a person is going to plow? V'zoreya B'Shat Zoreya, and he's going to plant at the time of planting. V'kotzer B'Shat Ketzira, he's going to cut the produce at the time of the cutting season, of the harvesting season. V'dash b'shat disha, and he's going to thresh at the time of the threshing. V'zoreya b'shat ruach, at the time of the wind, he's going to winnow, right? He's going to throw the wheat up, and it's going to cause all the chaff to fly away. It's part of the process of harvesting, of when you're bringing in wheat and stuff like that. It's part of the process. So every day, all the time, you're going to be busy at work. So if you're always going to be busy working, Torah mati Allah, what's going to be with Torah? So Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says like this: at the time that the Yid and the Jews are doing what they're supposed to be doing, the work that the Jews have to do, meaning all their let's say all the cases that he said, right? Planting and plowing and winnowing and all these different parts of work will be done through other people that either are not learning or through the goyim, the non-Jews. Right? It's being done through other people. Other people will take care of your work, and you'll still get the paycheck. Strangers are going to stand up. They're going to get up, and they're going to shepherd your sheep. So you see, other people are going to do it. If the Jews are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, they're not doing Torah and mitzvot. So then the work that they have to do is going to be placed on themselves. They're going to have to do it themselves, and they're not going to be able to have time to learn. They're going to have to go out in the field and work. You're going to have to go and gather in your grain. Not only that, if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, if you're not doing Torah mitzvot, then not only are you going to have to do your own work, not only your own work you're going to have to do, but you're going to have to do other people's work. That you're going to serve your enemies. So you're going to have to work for other people. Amar Abaya says, right, this is the famous part. A lot of people did, like Rabbi Shmuel, that they did half-time learning, half-time working, and they were able to have their parnasa properly, and they had Torah learning proper. And Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochai, a lot of people did like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, that they sat and learned all day. Most of them were not able to handle it. To sit and learn all day is tiresome and it's very difficult. And it's hard to have a parnasa, right? Because the person is always worrying where their money is going to come from. So therefore, they weren't successful. It sounds like an either or, not in Gashmiut, not in Ruchniut, not in learning, not in their parnasa, not in their livelihood. And Amalei Rava Rabbanan, the Rava told his students, the Rabbanim, the Torah students, that I beg of you, don't come to Shir, don't come to Amud Yomi, during Nisan and Tishrei. Why? Because that's the planting season, is in Tishrei right before the rains come. So you want to plant, you want to make sure everything is ready. And Nisan is the time of harvesting. It's the time that you bring in the grain, you bring in your fruits. So therefore, don't come to shir, don't come to yeshiva in those 2 months. Go out, make your parnasa. Why? In order that you shouldn't be worried and bothered a whole year trying to figure out where you're going to get your livelihood from. Because if you're not going to work in those 2 months, you're going to have to run around trying to find your livelihood. So don't come to shir for 2 months, those 2 months, and find your parnasa. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about in this Gemara, but it's bikiyut. I know that when the Rav told me, he said, I can't believe I'm going to be missing this Gemara. I'm like, should I skip it? You can do it after. It's like, no, just go right there. But there's a lot to talk about in this Gemara. Leave it at that. But obviously, this is a.
Can you hear a little something?
Well, the Mishnah in Amud says in Torah, in derech eretz. In derech eretz, in Torah. Right? That's the Mishnah. This is where the Mishnah is coming from, huh? That's right. So I was saying that derech eretz means normal livelihood, normal work. A person has to do that.
So it's advocating to work for 2 months straight without studying, so you could have your parnasa and then study.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you do. If you're a gardener, if you're a farmer, then I guess so. If you're something else, so people have their busy season. They have either whatever it is during, especially now, holiday season for a lot of people that do sales on different goods. This is the time of the year that they're Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbat. And you have you have all the other holidays that are coming up.
You dedicate time.
Yeah.
Go all out and working, and don't worry about that.
Right, if that's your parnasa, but most people's livelihood doesn't work like that. You go to work for 8 hours or whatever it is, and that's what you do. If you're able to learn for 6 hours, if you're able to work for 6 hours, do 6 hours. The more time you put into work, that means the more you're showing that I have to take care of my own parnasa. I have to take care of my own livelihood, and God, nothing happens. It's not up to you; it's up to me. And a person keeps doing that. It's tough because your whole life, their whole life, they're going to dedicate to their job. So then, what kind of a life is that? That's why the letter of the Satan, if you find by the menorah, the Baal HaTurim explains that by the menorah, there's no letter samach. There's no samach by the whole parsha of the menorah, which represents the Torah. So why? Because samach is the letter of the Satan, right? Satan. Okay. Well, Satan is really with the sin. So the truth is that Satan is only it's not really his name. It's his business title. Right? That's his title in business, because really his name is, right? This is a Sephardi crowd. His name is, it's only in all our Sidurim. Sam Kel. That's his name, right? That's what it says in the Sidurim. Not supposed to say it out, but that's really his name. So his letter, he's represented as a Samach. Why is he represented as a Samach? Because Samach is round, and he makes people just go round and round and round and round without thinking. In Judaism, we believe a person should go not as a circle, but as a spiral, upwards, hopefully, not downwards. Meaning you're going around, you come to the same place that you came to before, but you're a level higher. And you're constantly going up and up and up, but you're going in a circle, but you're constantly going up. That's why he's represented as a Sam Kel, which means blindness of God. Because his whole point is to make people work. Where you find this by Paro also. Paro understood this as well, that he used to make the Jews work so hard that they didn't have time to think. And when Moshe Rabbeinu came along and says, I think they should have a day off. I think you shouldn't work them so hard. He says, what? This is what they're thinking of? They're thinking of going to freedom. That means they're not working hard enough. Let's work them even harder. Now you have to make your own bricks. We're not going to supply you with bricks. That's the power of the Satan. That's what the Satan wants to make somebody believe, that if a person is bothered all the time with work, and just wasting his time, whatever it is, even nowadays for our phones and stuff like that, if we're on our phone, we're not thinking about life. We're not thinking about what is the importance of life. A person could waste his whole lifetime in this world and not accomplish almost anything. And when he comes to the grave, what are they gonna do? What are they gonna put on his tombstone? That he was what? Even the Goyim, I remember Orlovsky as a joke. That's not a joke, but he used to say that even a hitman or a mafia guy, when it comes to his funeral, what are people saying? This guy was a great killer? No, they say he was good, nice to his mother, and he was a good friend. Even this terrible type of a person, but they're always going to try and say good things about it. And people want to live a life where at the end they're going to say all these good things about him. But does he live that type of a life where he's gonna where he's trying to get to that point of his life where people are actually going to say that about him? No, not necessarily. So that is an important thing that a person then learns. At least if a person learns, he learns Musar, he learns Halacha, especially the Gemara, which is full of everything. It's full of all these things. It teaches a person what the purpose of life is, and it gives a person a certain amount of focus in his life. That means when you go out to work, why are you working? Are you working because you're bored and you have an addiction to work, and that's why you're working? Or are you working in order to bring home a paycheck in order to feed your family? And therefore, a person will understand, okay, one second, if that's my goal, so then how much time am I going to set aside for working? How much time am I going to set aside for learning? How much time am I going to set aside for vacation? Not to say that person should go on vacation, but again, that's why to have a Rav who you're very close with, who knows your family dynamics, could really guide you in the proper way. I used to ask my Rebbe Zitzal when he was alive, we used to ask him, how much vacation should I take? How many days? Where do we go? Well, I used to discuss it with him all the time. So that's why it's important to have a Rav and to discuss these things. Or as a person's life is going to be just wasted. How many people are, Anu amelem or mekablim schar. We say this by every siyum, right? When we finish a mesachta, we work hard and we get reward for it, and they work hard and they don't get work for it, right? We wake up for proper things. They wake up for just to waste their life. So that's why he even says that tzaddikim, righteous people, even when they're alive, even when they're dead, they're considered alive. The amount that they could produce even after their death. We're looking at it over here. You're learning Gemara. People from thousands of years ago, they're still alive. Every time we say over something that they say in their grave, they're saying it over. That's why it doesn't say Rabbi Amar, or Rabbi said in the past. It says Amar Rabbi. Right now he's saying Amar. It's saying it's in a present situation. This is what they're doing. But a person has to always remember what is the purpose of your life, and that's why the Mesilat Yesharim in the beginning of his sefer, the Mesilat Yesharim, he says that if a person would start to think, miyad uvevadai, right away, for sure a person will change from what he's doing. Because the purpose of the Satan, all he tries to get a person to do is work, try and get his mind not to think. Because if a person would think logically and think, okay, what is the purpose of life? What happens after this life? Is there a heaven and a hell? If there is, how do you get there? What do you do? How do you get a ticket to get in? Which online site sells it? So you're going to try and figure it out. But if a person just goes, and he doesn't think, so that's the way Paro worked the Jews, where they were just like, leave us alone. We don't want to hear about anything. This is what we do, and this is what we do. A little bit on this Gemara. I'm just saying that this Gemara has a lot, but he asked for a little bit, so we give him a little bit.
Can we get a little more?
After hours.
Nice.
This is after hours. Okay, anyway. So that a person has to keep in mind how much Torah learning, how much parnasa, but we have to do what's normal. Rabbi Shimon Yochai, that's the way where a person is supposed to do. A person has to go out to work. But again, a person has to remember that a person could even have a coffee in the morning, and his coffee could be learning Torah. Right? If he drinks his coffee in the morning to say, I need this coffee because I need to wake up, because I need to come to Amud because it's my life, then when he gets up to Shemayim, they're going to take this cup of coffee, hopefully it's nice and heavy, and they're going to put it on your mitzvot side. They're going to put it on your good deed side. The guy behind you is going to say, hey, I had a lot of coffees. I had 5 coffees a day. I'm in good shape. They're going to tell him, well, what did you have a coffee for? I just had a coffee because I needed to wake up to, waste my life. They're going to tell you, go take your coffee, put it on the other side. So anything a person does, if he does it, l'shem shemayim, if he does it with the proper intent, so it'll work for him for credit. Okay, going weiter, further. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Meshur Rabbi Yehuda bar Elai. This is a scary Gemara, but okay, this is talking about close to 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Yehuda bar Elai. So the earlier generations, again, this is 2,000 years ago, talking about earlier generations of that. Their generation is not like our generation, for sure not ours nowadays. They made their Torah their main focus in life, and their work was something as something they needed to do. Meaning, in the time of the Gemara, in the time over there, you see everybody did work. Let's say Shammai, for example. Shammai was a builder by trade. He was a contractor, right? That's why the famous story when he beat the guy who came in who said, "Teach me Torah on 1 foot." He beat him, and it doesn't mean that he beat him. He took his ruler that he used he tapped him. Get out. This is not how you do. This is not how you come to Torah learning. It's not a joke. You don't make a joke out of Torah. Or Rabbi Yeshua, the holy Rabbi Yeshua, who said, Torah Bashamayim, when the bat kol came out, when the heavenly voice came out and said that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer, he says, please stay out of our business. The Torah doesn't belong up there. It belongs to us. Yeah, we make these decisions. Imagine you heard a bat call that comes out, it would freak us out. But he gets up and says, please stay out of our business, with all due respect. What was he? He was a person who used to make needles. That was his craftsmanship. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. He was called Nafcha because he was a blacksmith. That's why he got the last name of Nafcha. So you see that Papa used to make beer. He was a beer man, right? So you constantly find Abai used to water his fields at night. If somebody would come to him during the day and say, teach me Torah, he says, okay, I'll make you a deal. I'll teach you Torah if you water my fields at night. I got to make up for the time I'm learning with you. So you water my fields, I'll learn with you Torah. You find all of them used to do work. This is how they used to, but their focus in life was the Torah. That's what they used to do. So since they made their Torah their main focus in life, but their work was a side thing that they did. So therefore, they had both. They had a good gashmiut and they had a good ruchniut. They had a good spiritual life and a good physical life. They did the exact opposite. They made their work the most important thing in their life. And the Torah, they came to a shir over here. They had a shir over there. They listened to a shir on Torah. Anytime here and there, they didn't make it their main focus in life. They didn't have ruchniut and they didn't have gashmiut. Another thing that he said, another comparison between the earlier generation and the later generation, that how great was the earlier generation. They used to bring in their fruits through the main gate in order to make themselves obligated in giving meiser. Right? This halacha is that in order to be chayiv in meiser in 1/10 that you have to give. So the only time you're chayiv to give is besides when you pile it up, but when you bring it into your house. The chachamim, the rabbis tell us that it has to be through the main gate. If you bring it through the backyard, if you bring it through the roof, the skylight, all these ways, not called penei habayit, which literally means the face of the house, which means the main door. So if you bring it in through the main door, then the person is chayav to give the maaser that he has to give. So what people used to do is they used to try and get out of it, and they didn't want to have to give this extra 1/10 of their produce away. So what would they do? They would bring it in through all different methods in order not to come through the main gate. Right? So the earlier generation, they wanted to obligate themselves in bringing it, so they would make sure to bring it through the main gate. They wouldn't bring it through the backyard. But the later generations that they didn't want to obligate themselves to give this extra amount, they would bring it in all circumventive ways in order not to be chayav. How do you know that? How do you know this? That you're only chayav, if you're only obligated to give this ma'aseh, this 1/10, if you come to the front door. The Amar of Yanai and Hatevel mitchayev b'ma'aseh atcher p'nei habayit. Tevel is the untithed food, I think is the word in English, right? Before you take off all the things that a person has to take off, there's teruma, which is a certain amount that goes to the Kohen. You have ma'aseh, that certain amount goes to the Levi. You have a different ma'aseh, ani or sheni, that goes to either has to be in Yerushalayim. All these different things that a person has to give off. Before you give it off, it's called tevel. If somebody eats it, it's death penalty. Right? You're not allowed to eat it. So over here, if somebody has this non-tithe food, produce, so how do you know that you have to see the front of the house in order to be obligated in order to give it? The pasuk says, "Be'arti hakodesh min habayit." It has to be from the house, which means the front of the house. No, not just the face of the house, meaning not just the opening, the main gate of your house, but even if you have a courtyard, but it's kovea over there, then you would also be obligated to give the fruits. Shenem, and the pasuk says, "V'achalta b'sharecha v'achlu b'sharecha v'savehu." Right, you're gonna eat in your gate, which means the chater, and then you're gonna be satiated, which is where we know that by even in a chater, even in a courtyard, a person will be chayav. All right, now we're back to the real stuff. That was all fun and games, but not that it's difficult. The reason why it's difficult is because when it comes down to halacha, a lot of these halachot are very complex when it actually comes down to halacha lamaz. The Gemara itself is not that complicated, so don't be so worried. So the Mishnah said that on all fruits you say bor priya et, except for yayin. Yayin, you have a special bracha, right? You say bor pri, a gefen, depending on what your gear says. Okay. So the Gemara obviously is going to ask, why is yayin so special? Why does yayin get its own bracha? You don't find that by other things. How come yayin is so special that it gets its own bracha, right? It's an obvious question. So the Gemara says, Ma'ishna yayin. What's the difference by wine? That by wine you get its own bracha, you get a special bracha, a gafen or a gefen, and by other things, even if you change it, it doesn't get its own special bracha. The Gemara says, we're going to try and see if we can get to it, right? If you want to say the reason why it's special is mishum de'ishtanele luye, is because it changed for the better. Before it was grapes. Now you have wine. Wine is an important thing. It's a chashuv thing. Therefore, since it changed for the better, right? Wine is obviously more expensive than grapes, even with inflation. Right? It's still very expensive. So since wine is a better thing than grapes, so therefore maybe you should get its own beracha. So therefore, since it changed physically for the better, it's starting the bracha. Therefore, it gets a special bracha. So the Gemara says, 1 second, that can't be why. What about oil? When you have olives, so when you have olives and you produce olive oil from it, so the olive oil is more important, is a better thing than the olives itself. So therefore, but we don't find that there's a special bracha on olive oil. So therefore, you can't jump the gun. We're going to get there, hopefully.
Olive oil? I thought it's charcoal. Okay.
Well, that's why you come to Amud Yomi. Let's see. First of all, the question is, who drinks olive oil?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the question number one. If you do drink it, what bracha do you make on it? Okay, so we have a lot to discuss, to say the least. So you don't say a special bracha on it. The bracha, we're assuming that you're going to stay on olive oil, right? That was bar priya 8. That's the Gemara's assumption right now. So therefore, but the question over here is whether you say shahakal bar priya 8. Shahakal is a very general bracha, so it's not a special bracha. So hagefen is a special bracha. You don't say shahakal on wine, even though it changed. You have a new bracha called bar priya hagefen. The only thing you make it on. So you find by olive oil, you don't say a special bracha on. So if you don't say a special bracha, obviously the fact that you change it from its original status to something new, even if it's something better, is not enough of a reason to say you make a bracha on it. So the Gemara says, how do you know you don't change the bracha on olive oil? If you drink olive oil, you don't make a bracha. They said, Shemen Zayd Mavarcham Alav. Here's part of your answer. What bracha do you make? Bar pri ha'etz. If you have olive oil straight up, nothing mixed in, you would make a bar pri ha'etz. Don't go home and drink olive oil and make a bar pri ha'etz just yet, okay? To be careful. So you make a bar pri ha'etz. So you see, don't make a special bracha on olive oil. You make a regular bar pri ha'etz. It doesn't change. So therefore, again, we're back to the original question. How come by wine you make a special bracha bar pri hagefen? So the Gemara says, 1 second. Amri, they said, Hata mishum d'lo yavshar. Over there by olive oil, what process of elimination, what are you supposed to make? What bracha should you make? If you wanted to give it a special bracha, what bracha would you make? So the Gemara helps us out. Hechi nevarich. What bracha would you make? How would you make a special bracha? Nevarich bar priya zayit. If you want to say bracha d'Hashem al kenim al bar priya zayit, which would be the most logical thing to say, what's the issue with that? Peri gufa zayit, it's ikre. The fruit itself is called zayid, meaning the olive is called a zayid. So you're saying bar pri hazayid, which is the olive. You're talking about the olive, and you're going to say that's in reference to the olive oil. That doesn't make any sense. On the regular fruit, you're not going to say hazayid, which is what it's called. On the byproduct of it or the product of it, what comes out of it, you're going to make the bar pri ha'etz. It doesn't make any sense. So, bar pri hazayid. So that won't work. Because the fruit itself is called zayid. So for the Gemara asks the questions. Okay, so v'nivach aleh bar pri, it's zayid. Okay, so don't say bar pri zayid. Say bar pri, it's a zayid, right? The olive tree. So you're making the fruit that comes from the olive tree, which is not the olive. It's a fruit from the olive tree, which would be the olive oil. So that's how you can get out of it. Maybe you should make that bracha. Samara says, okay, fine. That the fact that we don't find the bracha is out the window because we do find the bracha. Really, you could say bar pri 8 zayd. So the Gemara says, Elamar Zucha, a new reason. What's the reason why wine is different than olive oil or everything else? Chamra zayd. Wine is nourishing. It nourishes a person. Mishcha loy zayd. However, oil doesn't nourish a person. Okay, 6:40, so we got to go. So I guess tomorrow we'll start from the 2 dots again. Be'ezrat Hashem. We're trying to become yucky for 6:40.